that power that you talk about, that ruled this world for 5,000 years, they want it back. They want their world back, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. As I said, we've already fought wars. We've already lost millions of people, and they still have not won. Lucifer and his followers were originally in the Garden of Eden separated from higher Adam. You'll recall this argument that Lucifer had with God after he was called out, like, hey, what did you do to Eve? Eve immediately confesses, says, look, this is what happened. And so God said, all right, I'm going to try to clean up this mess. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to crawl on your belly for the rest of your days and eat dust. And that didn't sit too well. So he said, well, if you do that, if you curse me for the same thing that we do on every single world, then I'm going to take all the bodies that you make for Adam and Eve, and I'm going to possess them. And then God in the Bible, in Genesis, takes this amazing step. He creates what he calls enmity. He says, I will put enmity between thee and the seed of the woman. He'll have power. You'll have power to bruise his heel, and he'll have power to crush your head. In other words, it's our choice as to whether you take us or not. But I'm saying somehow, you're right, somehow Lucifer figured out how to get his spirits into physical bodies on this planet. I don't know exactly when it was done, but I can tell you, evil is born on this world. It is born evil. It grows up evil as a child. It is an evil young man. It is an evil adult. They enjoy hurting other people.
We said within a 50-mile radius from this point here, there is an underground laboratory where all this Frankenstein stuff is going on. While our government thinks that we're preserving our soldiers by building a super soldier of a kind of a cybernetic thing, they're actually reinstalling the disembodied spirits we call demons back into a body, and this is their resurrection. This is what they're creating as an army that's going to turn back on them, because they don't have three dimensions. They don't have a spirit, soul, and body. They got maybe a soul that's weakened and a body, but the evil spirits are the ones controlling and operating everything. So our military is being manipulated.
But what this points to, at least from my perspective, is that we're not dealing with extraterrestrials. We're dealing with something that is meddling in mythology. And like I said before, using the pin of physiological constructs to author its own mythology. To where you and I, like I said before, our ancestors believe they're demonic. Why? Because they manifested as demonic. This is no different than when Ed Warren was on a case and he said that he witnessed a real demon. And somebody said, well, what did it look like? He said, well, it had horns. Okay, let's test that. Let's go back into antiquity. When did the horned demon originate? Okay, it wasn't there. That was literally it was a belief system that our ancestors just put on and kind of projected upon the phenomenon. But what that is, though, my friend, is we caught the phenomenon in real time as it leans into an archetype that has no real historical record.
What if it's not? So our ancestors, ancient ancestors, or not even ancient, our ancestors, it manifested to them as somewhat demonic.
That's what I'm saying.
And it still kind of does now, but now I would say majority is it's kind of a mix, or maybe a little bit more of manifesting into our loving space brothers.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like it's not just authoring its own mythology, but it's using an avatar that we cannot really vet. I mean, the two portions of our existence we are the most ignorant of. I say death and the outer space. I mean, the third one would be, at the bottom of the oceans, of our oceans. But what it comes down to is we cannot vet this. And the reason our ancestors believed in these archetypes, it's not because they just woke up one day. No, it's because that was what the phenomenon gave them to believe in. right? And then so now as it evolves according to our awareness of it, it's changing its archetypes. And now what we have is exactly the point you just made, the alien, the extraterrestrial, which now it's pushed us in a corner to where we cannot verify the nature of the message. Is it beneficial, or is it a Trojan horse? More than that, is what they're telling me, is that actually true? Can I actually believe in their message? And so where we're at right now in all of this, it's sad, but it's true. Now it's like, okay, how do I verify the truthfulness of your message to humanity? Oh, that's right. Phenomenon. Manifestation. Something that would impress anybody. And so it's almost like we're groping in the darkness, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. They do not want us to verify and validate them. That's, in my perception, I think that's why they authored the Avatar of the Alien.
For the record, I started out believing that these were space aliens. I really did. When I first started realizing what I was dealing with, I thought they were space aliens. And now I don't think they are. I do think that these entities were probably created before we were ever created. Timothy Alberino will refer to them as the elder race. So a race that was created for the spiritual realm, to rule the spiritual realm, masters of the spiritual realm. And then I believe humans came along after that. So you could look at them as they're probably very similar to us. And I think they were created for the astral. There's a possibility we were created for the earth and they were created for the astral, but I don't know that. Is it possible we were also created in a spiritual realm, and our so-called fall is actually what brought us to the earth? I consider that as well. But either way, I think we have spiritual beings who rebelled against their creator and were cast to the earth. And I think that this is where they are, and this is where they've been for a very long time. I think you've already referred to the many disguises that they wear. And there's been times that they've changed their tactics. And right now they're presenting themselves as aliens from outer space. But I think it's always been the same thing. So I think these creatures likely have their own prodigy and their own creations. I think, although I don't find them extremely creative, I think they could patch things together off of something that's already been created. And I think this is where we're getting these aliens, what we refer to as aliens. I think these are probably hybrid creatures, probably have a lot of human DNA in them. And I think that these alien creatures were probably created to better interact with humans in the 3D, in the physical realm. And so imagine spiritual beings that can take on physicality, but that is not their primary disposition. So I think that these aliens, which appear to be metaphysical beings, they can be very 3D and absolutely interact in the physical realm. And then in the next instant, they can take you into the astral realm or into a realm that is not physical. And so I think these entities were created by these spiritual beings to better interact with us and kind of carry out the agenda that they've had for thousands of years.
Now, when we're dealing with consciousness, when we're dealing elements with the brain, the mind itself, because the two are separate components, I believe that this is the way that these greys hack, or this phenomena, not so much the greys, but this intelligence hacks into the system. And people say, oh no, because what I'm saying here is that our soul, if want for a better word, our consciousness, the awareness itself, is the real element of what we are. And I believe that we incarnate and we don't have full access to those other memories from elsewhere. Let's just argue that, because I don't see any point in us just evolving biologically, being born and then dying, and that's it. What is the point to all of this? There is some form of continuation. I know that. But I believe that this phenomena, and that is correct, is there is some kind of energy signature or something that attracts this phenomena to you, to the individual. And this may explain why there is some kind of intergenerational program. There is something that these entities, whatever they are, want. There's something that they're interested in. Now, when we deal with consciousness, people tend to think of it as, oh, it's just imagination. It's a little box in your head that opens and closes now and again. Rubbish. Imagination is mind, and with the mind, it's omnipresent. It can create absolutely anything. Granted, if something is sent out into the ether and it's not strong enough, it may just cancel itself out. But, it's interesting if this is the case that we are somehow co-creating this force, then why we're not being abducted by Darth Vader and the stormtroopers, or, we're having the Daleks come for us. Why is it this actual formation of the grey? Let's just take that as an example. I'm not talking about the fairies from the past, or which Jack Valet is most famous for, God love him. There is something that this phenomena is doing, and it's very clever. And I believe that it's able to hack. That's a good word to use. It can hack into our consciousness. And when it comes into our field frequency of awareness, it will override our sense of reality, because the greys will be able to have that instant access, not just to memories, but also everything that you've got stored here. And this is the other thing as well too, this fear that comes in, you're overridden with this fear, and this fear promotes this level of an increase within the phenomena, as it were.
So my point here is that early in my career, I was drawing this kind of comparison, artificial intelligence or some kind of phenomenon that would often, like I said before, employ a learning matrix. And so I would the way I would articulate that is, okay, there was the pathology of staring into the eyes of the entity. And for those who are familiar with my research, I would often say, okay, it's almost like they're not just hacking into the optic nerve, like David Jacobs says. It's almost like they're hacking into the mind itself and going through the Rolodex of images in our minds that it could incarnate as. And so between the proto-intelligence and the incarnation of the archetype, there is a sharing of information. And I've always been looking for that trigger. How? What's going on? So when I lectured at the Awakening, I likened it to the spider-tailed Iranian viper who's out in the sun, right? He wants to eat birds. So what does he do? He modifies his appearance to an archetype that would be perceivable and that was able to manipulate its prey, which was a spider. He was hungry for a bird. What is a bird hungry for? A spider. And so literally by the virtue of evolution, it materialized and created this spider at the very tip of its tail. So now the proto-intelligence is hiding in the shadows, and it's whipping its tail out in the sun. The bird thinks it's a vulnerable spider. I'm hungry. So he dive bombs onto the spider, latches onto it, not realizing that there's a sharing of information between the snake and the spider, that the proto-intelligence is incarnating that archetype. And so we need to realize that there seems to be, again, not just the difference between the proto-intelligence and how it's incarnating, but that sometimes it is seeking to be seen in order to incarnate.
Very well
Seeking
said.
to be seen. And I've noticed this in the pathology of not just abductions, but in hauntings, where Steve Mera's research also implicated this phenomenon, where he said something fell off the wall, but when they tested it, right, it wasn't as loud as the phenomenon made it. And so when we're looking at this, I kept noticing, right? Okay, you see it from the peripheral. Are you looking at it? Not really. And then when it manifests to you, there is a change where the phenomenon, it's almost like it triggers the phenomenon into incarnating an archetype. It's no longer the snake. When you see it, it becomes the spider. When you see the orb, it projects the apparition. Right? And so there is this kind of co-creation of the archetype. The phenomenon is incarnating. We in quantum mechanics would call that the observer effect, where the proto-intelligence exists, but it seeks to be seen. And once it is seen, the act of observation changes the phenomenon that's being observed. Let me break it down even more. The consciousness of the observer collapses different versions of the same entity.
And it's difficult because nobody wants to face the darker side of this subject. And as you know, you mentioned Steve and Barry Fitzgerald earlier, and last year I spoke at the dark side of ufology, and along with Nathaniel. And because there is a dark side to it, I'm sat here today, and I'm not going to go on about the night people, but I've got this T-shirt on and I've got that behind me because that's about my own experiences from childhood. And whatever it was that interacted with me, there was a darkness to it. It wasn't good. So we know that you can't have dark without light, and a lot of people want to look at the euphoric love and light aspect of the subject, but I'm afraid that there's a much darker side to it as well. You know, I've looked into the animal mutilations in great detail. I spent 3 years with one farmer when he was losing livestock. We never fully understood what was doing it, but I was the one that were on those fields at 4:30 in the morning. Some unexplained phenomena was responsible for those animal fatalities. Nothing removes eyes, ears, and strips the facial skin of livestock. And takes no prime meat. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but you know, when you're talking about the people in higher places knowing all about this, I mean, maybe they don't. Maybe they think they're saving us. Maybe people in higher places think that they're somehow protecting us by not filling us in on these darker aspects of the subject. But it's same as you know, you hear people talk about abductions and the fact that. You hear some people say, oh, it's a MILAB, and a military type abduction. And I'm thinking to myself, so we've got the technology to infiltrate, dematerialize and appear in somebody's home and take an individual. Why aren't we eradicating bad people in this world if we've got that technology? I don't think that's what's happening. I think it's alien tech, alien abductions are taking place, or abductions of humans. When I say alien, I don't necessarily mean from outer space. Whatever it is already here. And it's just got the ability somehow to slip in and out of our sphere of existence. How that works, I don't know.
So this is how I see it now, like an erasure of identity so that they live through us and carry out their agenda through us. And so we're their vehicles now as hosts to carry out their agenda, their life, because they have no life, because they're not connected to the real life of human, connected to the divine, which would be God, and something other than that has been somehow overshadowed or traumatized so that they don't remember their original self. So this is how I see it now, like an erasure of identity so that they live through us and carry out their agenda through us. And so we're their vehicles now as hosts to carry out their agenda, their life, because they have no life, because they're not connected to the real life. So that's what even Dr. Corrado Malanga of Italy found out in his basic research over 30 years. And he's more retired from working with abductees and regressions and, you know, compiling research to create this hypothesis that the original intention was, wait a minute, you know, like, what are these aliens doing? And like, who are they? But we couldn't really know who they were until we figured out, well, who we are as humans. And so humans as a spirited being in a triad of consciousness in the human body has a quality of power and identity and, well, how we perceive ourselves in our reality.
And I agree with you. I think most people are just trying to pay their bills and get their kids to school and do a decent job at work and have just enough time to enjoy the weekend if they are able to. And we just don't stop to think about this unseen realm that's actually all around us, full of entities for us and against us. And to me, it almost seems like we're in a proxy war. So I look at this as an actual battle between the powers of good and the powers of bad, the evil versus good, however you want to look at it. It's an actual battle, a cosmic war. And it was said, not by me, but we are both the pawns and the prize in this game. And I think we are heavily influenced, and I think our little chess pieces are moved around the board, trying to win a war we're not even aware of.
I mean, if one thing, you would be able to transmit a demon into your soul, right? If we were to open a portal into another dimension. So you have the alpha magnetic spectrometer on the International Space Station that can peer into the anti-universe. And then you've got these portals created by CERN, ISCAT, or CERN, and Brookhaven National Labs, and wherever else they might have particle collider somewhere. And it's really curious because all of this does go back to the esoteric, does go back to these ancient stories and these ancient magics. And you'll find these, showing up all over the place in these systems and their titles and names and things. There does seem to be an outside influence, and ritual magic seemed to be the course in which way we got this information. Of course, we can deal with the idea of extraterrestrial communication, the ability and of them to maybe have given us this information. I don't know what I think about extraterrestrials, right? Like, I don't think anybody came here from a flying saucer from Zeta Reticuli and then crashed. Like, I don't believe you could come here in a flying saucer. Now, you might be able to open a portal into a space-time continuum, and be able to just instantaneously go somewhere. But these ideas of these long-distance travels don't make any sense to me. So if I were to start to look at the Greys as an extraterrestrial race, I wouldn't say they were extraterrestrial. I'd say they're subterranean. I'd say they existed on this planet since long before white man came to planet Earth and started to change things the way things were going.
I sometimes wonder, I said in Digital Demon, that was published 2020, that the Trojan horses, the UFOs might have been Trojan horses, very things fashioned by it and sent in to deliver God knows what. Was it dispatching pieces of electronics to enhance, to move us from the valve to the transistor to the microprocessors? It makes you think, doesn't it? We're never going to know. Was it dispatching things to help, knowing the very core military would apprehend it and they would utilize it? Of course they would, to then deploy it into every home in the future, And it's funny, I stated that the UFOs, apart from Judge Proctor's farm that was destroyed by the airship in the 1890s, that crashed somewhere in the town or near the town, it destroyed his flower bed, so it must have been there. They have always crashed more or less in the wilderness, so they just away from public scrutiny, but giving enough clout for the military to actually apprehend it and take it away, scoot it away, Were the Greys then, the pilots just conjured as mere dolls to make it look like it was a UFO from another planet, when in actual fact it's a huge deception, something else, utilizing every method of our minds and what's in vogue to create a future utopia. If this is the case, I have written this, it will be very patient. So that is very worrying. If it's very patient, it must either be eternal or it has longevity. As God knows, our lives are like butterflies in comparison. I don't know. But, these are wonderful thoughts, because it's good to just lash them out, Michael, these ideas, to bring them to the fore and to discuss them, to openly discuss them. And that is freedom of speech. So it's what is very important in this, without people saying, no, you're wrong, and then calling you a liar. When, to be honest with you, and I'm going to say it for the record, I have always maintained, as I do now, that we have absolutely no evidence whatsoever. People argue, say we've captured them on film. It's debatable in this new age. It's debatable. I'm not condemning them, but we have got nothing, only a bag full of supposition, theories. But there is something, because I've seen them myself. They are not of this world. They are not from here. So yes, the majority of people have seen these things. Just what they are, we have got no idea what we are dealing with. None.
So if there is this program by these so-called greys who are interested in their subjects in terms of mind connection, of downloading all the information of what emotions are like, what feelings are like, aging, taste, color, they've been devoid of that. And I wondered, because I had a article published back in 1996 called Spirits in the Material World, on whether or not these greys had counseled themselves out of creation, found a species that can reproduce, and they hoped that in some way this could be their salvation. This could be their step towards rebuilding or restructuring themselves through the incarnation, through a reincarnation program, incarnation process. To afford them their right passage back to the divine. I don't know. That was the first idea. I have many ideas that I've been working on in terms of that, and that would also kind of like bring into the fray that how they're able to come through walls and doors, how they're able to abduct someone, and also take into account the lack of memory that the individual has when they're abducted. But it could also be possible that these beings are creating a new genus because we as the human species are just about to wipe ourselves out, and whether or not this new genus will be able to exist beyond another known universe, that's another idea, because you have all these people telling you how it is. But if we go back to your question about Aleister Crowley, about Lam. Now, what's interesting is Thoth, the Egyptian deity that was supposedly came into our world through, self-replication. We're beginning to find out now, interestingly, that matter can be created through light. This has been experimented on within nuclear fusion, this type of research that's going ahead. And this calls into question, how did we begin? How did we evolve? Did we just bring ourselves into being here? What are we part of? And I think perhaps with these greys, they are interested in something. And the reason that we consider that their operations are, hidden, most people say, oh, there's this code of contact, universal code of contact. Rubbish. They've broken that already if they've integrated with us. But why the secrecy?
Directive that everybody talks about.
Yeah. Why the secrecy? Why do they keep themselves within the shadows? Why have they got this agenda that they keep coming in? Now, another great author that you might want to check out, who's written a book called Out of Time, Steve Aspin. He's here in England. He believes that these greys are interested in some type of intergenerational program. And he's had experiences with the greys. Steve Aspin, a wonderful guy. And we're all trying to put the pieces together about, they come in, they go out. And you'll also find that the reason behind their connection with humans is quite strange, because they kind of like don't want to be known. They don't want to advance us. They're not giving anything to us where we are able to advance as a species, or indeed the individual. All they do, the greys do, is lie half the time. But Thoth, going back to the Egyptian deity, and I'm sure you've heard of the emerald tablets of Thoth, and of course this whole thing about them being found in the pyramids of Cheops or Giza Plateau in 1925, and of course the esoterical parts of this stone, or the tablets as it were, that was never discovered, but the literature of which is in terms of hieroglyphs has been deciphered, is quite interesting. And he is supposed to be the creator of the universe, the egg, and we hear about this all the time, this egg, as if something's in its primary stages of development before its embryonic formation into matter. So you'll find, Michael, that when you start looking into this area, symbology, also the dark arts, the mind consciousness, it, I think, plays a major element in all of this. So I believe that when we go back to when Baroness Thatcher said to Georgina Bruni here in England, UFOs, first of all, you have to get your facts right. And when you do, that's when you'll find we can't tell the people, is because the system we serve will have a lot of explaining to do. And I think there'll be a lot of frightened folk out there who are and have been programmed to a basic level of living. And this is the problem, about the whole level of this inquiry. So it's not just one simple avenue that your good self, will go down. You will find that there are other multiple avenues that start to connect, and you might feel like you're losing the plot with some of it. But then eventually, like most things, when you have and you find there are certain key components or connections to be found with regards to one subject matter to the other, you're like, hang on just a minute. You're like your own private detective. You're like, hang on just a minute. What is this? And you'll be able to determine what you feel is truth and what you feel is complete fabrication within your analysis of the way that you see reality. So yes, it does kind of like get in here. And I will tell you, in my early years, I had to take a break from it because it was just too overwhelming. I thought I was going to go over the edge here, and unfortunately, I don't know of them, but I knew of, because one of them was in touch with me, another author who was involved with UFO research, but also the darkest side, that unfortunately met a very untimely passing because I think it got into his head too much. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with this subject matter and kind of like take it within your own pace. But certainly when it happens to you, it changes everything. And there is a fear factor connected with it. Most definitely, there is this fear. And that was demonstrated magnificently. The last viewing of 3 massive circular objects on the 9th of April 2016 here, with me and my twin brother, that was witnessed by many other people and filmed by my niece. It's a long story, but again, you're left, okay, so you're there, you've descended, you're right above us. Why? What is this? What do you want? And you get nothing.